Hello and welcome to this video. Today I am trying to answer the prompt number 22 of Ethony's 31 Days of Tarot 2021, and the prompt for today is: if you were shipwrecked on a deserted island, which 5 tarot or oracle deck would you like to have with you and why? So this is a very difficult question for me, and I have already tried to answer this question a few years ago when Kelly Bear had posed the same question as an internet YouTube tag in the tarot community. And back then, I think it was in 2016 or 2017, back then I had tried to answer the question and I had many difficulties making my list shorter than 10 decks. So today I'm trying to answer it again, and I think I have managed more or less to make a list of 5, but it's very difficult, and I will tell you why. So if I was shipwrecked on a deserted island and I could only have 5 decks, first of all I will have the Bohemian Gothic tarot. This one is very important to me because it's the first tarot deck that I bought for myself as a as a collectible item, as the first tarot decks that I bought because I was really in love with the illustrations, and initially I bought it for the illustrations only because at the time I did not read the Rider-Waite system. I did not even know what the Rider-Waite system was actually. I at the time I knew the tarot only through the Marseille tradition, and I was using the Marseille tradition to read the tarot. And this deck, I like the illustration so much that I purchased it for that reason, because I love the illustrations. So at first I was not really planning to read with it. I really wanted it because I love the illustrations. But one thing led to another, and I discovered the Rider-Waite Smith system through this deck. So it was my entryway to the Rider-Waite system, this deck. So for all those reasons, it's very important for me. It's very dear to my heart. And this is the second edition of the Bohemian Gothic. It has the pewter gilding, and the cardstock is a little bit different than that of the first edition, and also different from the style of cardstock that Baba Studio use nowadays. I've always liked all their cardstock. This one is a little bit more old-fashioned, more papery cardstock, more like an ancient playing card deck, I would say. It's a little bit thicker than what they use nowadays, and it's very nice to handle. It's very pleasant to handle. So this would be my first choice. Okay, then I would need to bring one Marseille deck and one Rider-Waite Smith deck. So if I was in a hurry and the ship was rapidly sinking to the bottom of the ocean, I would probably grab whichever Marseille deck and whichever Rider-Waite Smith deck. But if I had a few minutes to choose, I would choose the Jean-Pierre Payen Marseille deck. I have a few different Marseille decks, and I would probably choose this one. I like all the other ones. I have the Noblet and the Dodal, and I like them all, but I have a soft spot for this Jean-Pierre Payen. This one is a reproduction of, it's a faithful reproduction of the original Jean-Pierre Payen deck. So for the Marseille deck, I would choose this one. Let's see if I can show you some minors. And the court maybe. Okay, so that would be my Marseille deck. And as for the Rider-Waite Smith deck, if I had the time to pick up the one I prefer, I would pick the Albano-Waite, because I like the colors of the Albano-Waite, and also because it's a deck that I've been using a lot, and it's an old companion. I really like the vivid colors of the Albano-Waite, so if I had to choose among all the versions of the Rider-Waite Smith, I would take the Albano-Waite. So one Marseille deck, one Rider-Waite Smith deck, my faithful Bohemian Gothic deck, and there's only 2 spots left for before we reach the 5 deck limit, and this is becoming very difficult. Then I would take the one deck that I think it's so beautiful that I cannot live without it now. It's quite recent in my collection. Well, it's recent and not recent, because I also have the monochrome edition of this deck, which I like too. But the colored edition is so stunning. Now that I have discovered it, I would not want to be without it, and it is the Mythical Creatures Tarot by Baba Studio. So I would bring this one too. Also, I really like it because it has a lot of the Rider-Waite system in the majors and also in the courts. This Mythical Creatures Tarot. But the minors are pipish, so the minors are more reminiscent of a Marseille deck. So it is a sort of mix of both traditions, but also it's more than just a mix of the 2 traditions, because of all the mythical creatures and all the myths that are attached to the creatures in the illustrations. So it brings along all the folklore and myth of many different cultures, and for that reason I think it's a very rich deck with you can read it on many different levels. So I really like this deck. It's stunningly beautiful, but it's also very it brings very deep readings, and it makes you think. I like it for that reason. So I would bring this one. And then there is the Clover Tarot. So there is nudity in this deck, so if you don't want to see any nudity, maybe you want to skip this part. So the Clover Tarot from Nika Berne has always been a favorite of mine. I really like this deck. I really like the illustrations, the colors, and the way it describes each card. I've always had very profound readings with this deck. And it's also a deck that I have had for several years. And each year it's at the top of my list of most used decks and most loved decks. So this one was already on my list when I tried to answer the 5 favorite decks of all time back in, I think the first time I tried to answer this question was probably in 2016 or 2017, and this one was already on my list. Actually, the Bohemian Gothic, of course, was already on my list. The Albano-Waite was already on my list. One Marseille deck was on my list. I don't remember it if I had chosen the Jean-Pierre Payen or another, but I had one Marseille deck on my list. The Clover was on my list. Only the Mythical Creatures was not on my list because I didn't have this deck back then. Okay, so these are the 5 tarot decks I would bring if I was only allowed 5. And I would be very sad because I like to have many decks to choose from, because I like to rotate through my decks and I like to discover new images often. So 5 decks would not really be enough for me. I would be sad. I wish I could bring the Victorian Romantic Tarot. I wish I could bring the Fantastic Menagerie Tarot. I wish I could bring the Stellas Tarot, the Druidcraft Tarot, the Wild Unknown Tarot, and the Fountain Tarot, and many other tarot decks that I would really miss if I had to make do with only those 5. But I don't think I could do without those 5, which is why that's the way I have chosen to pick them up. They would not be sufficient for me, but I would really not want to be without those 5 decks, precisely those 5 decks. So I would like to have a deck to play with. I love divination, but I also like to play with decks, and I also like to play the tarot game. So I was thinking I could take a simple tarot playing card deck, because you can also do divination with those decks, so you can both play and use them for divination. And the thing is, of course, you can use any deck for playing the tarot game because it's the same structure. But as you see, it's very useful to have the card marked at the corner, so you can see when you fan your cards in your hands, you can see what you have. And if you fan the Rider-Waite Smith, if you have a hand of a few cards and you fan it, there's no way. I mean, it's very difficult to recognize, especially if you have many cards in your hands. It's difficult to recognize which is which because they are not marked at the corner. So, first of all, I thought that maybe I could take one of those tarot playing card decks, but it takes one of the 5 slots, and I already don't have enough tarot decks as it is. So if I take this one, it's one deck less in my list. So I thought I could try and bring the Tarot of Prague by Baba Studio, because the Tarot of Prague is marked at the corner. like you can see here, this ace, the number is here, number of the suit, and the symbol of the suit is here. So I thought that could be, maybe that could help. But unfortunately on this deck, which I love by the way, I absolutely love this deck, and if I could take more than 5 decks I would bring this one, but you know, with only 5 decks you have to make choices. But the problem is, like on this card, the majors are not marked on the corner, and even if the minors are marked, there is only the number of the suit and not the symbol. The symbol is on another corner, so that doesn't help when you find your cards in your hands. So I debated if I was taking the Tarot of Prague instead of one of those 2 decks, but I won't, because if I was taking this deck to play with, I would still have to write on it, to add the suit symbol here, and to add the number for the major in the corner, and I don't want to write on my Tarot of Prague Baba Studio deck. Well, of course, when you are stranded on a deserted island, it's things change and you don't have the same perspective. So maybe I would write on my Tarot of Prague if it was the only deck I had. But if it's not the only deck I have, I think I would prefer to write on my Albano-Waite in the corner. I think I would prefer to write the suit number and suit symbol and major number on this corner, rather than to write on a precious Baba Studio deck. But on a deserted island, you do whatever you have to do. So I think a better solution would be to bring those 5 decks, and hopefully to have one person who was shipwrecked with me, and persuade them to bring with them one tarot playing card deck. So we would have those 5 decks. I would have those for my divination, and the other survivors of the shipwreck would have playing card decks, and we could use those together too. But if I was shipwrecked by myself, that would be a problem, and I would probably have to write on this deck to turn it into a playing card deck. And also I would like a small traditional playing card deck, so I thought I would bring this very small little playing card deck called Portable Fortitude deck. It's not an oracle deck, it's not a tarot deck, it's a very small playing card deck, and each card is illustrated with a design that can serve as a small protection spell. So it serves multiple purpose. You can play with it at any game of card, except for the tarot game, which requires a bigger deck of 78 cards. But you can play poker or many other games with it. You can play the games where you play by yourself. I don't know the name in English, but there are games that you can play with only one player. So if I was stranded by myself, I would use it to pass the time, and I would use it to make spell to protect myself from all sorts of dangers that would lurk on the deserted island. And it's a very small deck, so I think I could probably hide it on my person and it would not count in the 5 deck allowance. So that's it. If I was really stranded on a deserted island, that's what I would try to do. But I have to say that if I was really on a ship and it was sinking at the bottom of the ocean, and I only had a few minutes to gather up my stuff and swim to the nearest shore, I don't think I would bring 5 decks. To be honest, I think I would try to grab a knife and some blankets and some matches or lighter or something to make a fire, and maybe some drinking water and bread and biscuits and something, so I would not starve right away. And I don't think I would think of grabbing 5 decks. And also, I hope I will never be in that situation, because I have to say I prefer the comfort of my own home for once, and secondly, I prefer to have more than 5 decks at my disposal too. So thank you very much. Bye bye.